This is Radar for On the Radar Entertainment Blog, coming to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations, number 169. Finally, a full slate week of movies. The first one I watched was The System. And I'm looking at this like, okay, Tyrese Gibson of Fast and Furious and other franchises, Terrence Howard of Iron Man and Empire, cool. Jeremy Piven, who was canceled for a brief moment, and they canceled the show. Cool, he's back. I was like, who the heck is Lil Yachty? Then I realized he's a rapper, and his scenes in the movie are him just ringside announcing stuff in this movie. And then there are probably some other actors that I've seen before, but the point of this movie is Tyrese Gibson is a struggling veteran who needs to pay for his daughter's cancer treatment. So it's like, okay, cool, let's throw that in there. He's not just a struggling veteran robbing drug dealers and all this other stuff, and he happens to get away with all the money and the drugs, and you know what happens. The cops show up and they talking really stupid. It's like whoever wrote the script of this movie was bad. Some of the cinematography was bad. Some of the camera angles were bad. Jeremy Piven kept going in and out of a horrible southern accent, just talk normally. They made Terrence Howard like this wise old, person who's, trying to teach him the ways of fighting, and he supposedly was a son of a martial arts teacher and all this other stuff. And you're just like, he's 54, Tyrese Gibson's 44. There's a 10-year difference. There can't be really a father-son relationship in that situation. But it was like, okay, well, we got a deal for you. The commissioner goes, if you infiltrate this maximum security private prison that there's no oversight because it's not run by the government, as Piven goes like it's like a KFC or McDonald's franchise and miss the GM of the place and how they do it, and you dig up dirt on that warden and everything else, I'll let you go at time served and all that other stuff. And he's like, I don't want to do it, but he has no other choice, and he gets screwed in the movie throughout multiple times. And you know how this prison is, illegal fighting ring. This is why he's in this outfit in the movie. They have him in this fighting thing, and there's different races and gangs in the prison, and they're making drugs in the prison as well. So it's like all this other stuff. And it's an interesting action movie, and I liked it. And of course, you can't have Tyrese Gibson losing or dying. So you're like, okay, cool. You knew at some point the outcome was going to be good because it's only an hour and 27 minutes. So you have to end it well enough. But it was cheesy. Then I watched The Cursed. And I want to tell you this. I've seen way too many horror films where it's just gory and disgusting, or boring and very stupid, or annoying and creepy and just waste of my time. This movie was very scary and creepy and horrific with the things that were happening. Yeah, there was some gore, but there's some really disturbing images, and that's kind of the point, I think, of horror film, is that you need to be scared and freaked out by what you're watching. You can't just be like, why is it put a horror film when it's a psychological film, or it's a movie of suspense and psychological things? You're just like, I don't really know. But this movie takes place after the World War I, where these gypsies are on this land and they own it, and these British people are like, we'll give you money, and they don't want it, so they kill them and they give them a curse. That's why it's called The Curse. And it comes back these years later to haunt the families, and these like teeth and like these weird creatures coming out of other people's bodies. It was just like, okay, you definitely filled the quota of creepy and scaring people out and stuff. And it's, again, 150 minutes with credit. More like an hour and 40-something minutes. So it's like your typical horror film. But it was actually something where I'm like, you know what? It's actually scary like it's supposed to. Then I have a whole pile of Bruce Willis movies waiting to watch with my former roommate / close friend of mine, where we try to watch all these Bruce Willis movies. And in this one, he's like sitting on a couch, barely moving. You see him going down an elevator, and you don't know if it's him in the elevator taking a cigarette, then him at a bar, barely moving around. Then there's a scene where he's like knocked unconscious, and you're like, okay. And that movie was a little bit cheesy, but it's interesting that they get, the guy from Entourage, who we just saw in a movie, we were sitting in a chair, type it away, and Mel Gibson's like a bomb expert to try bomb squad to help him out. In this one, he's like, I wanted some more action, so he's in this thing called a wire room, and they're building like a case on stuff. And my ex-roommate, who's, works for the government and stuff, goes, yeah, that agency that he's working for in this thing, like, that's a real thing. They're almost as big as the FBI, so that's realistic and all the stuff, but some of the jargon and the talking was not correct. And the things I like about the movie was supposedly there monitoring this bad guy, but then there's like another bad guy they got to worry about, and then there's like corruption in the sheriff's department, and you're like wondering, when are they going to call the cops? When are they call the higher ups at that agency? I forgot the name of it, but it's like, yeah, we got to call, like, he's like, why don't you call the agency up? Why don't you call the actual police department, not the sheriff's department? And how come in this movie you never pick up the rifles after you shoot the bad guys with your little handgun? Of course, you're out of bullets and things like that. And obviously, he's got to try to, like, survive because, like, well, the bad guy went after the other bad guy, and he's got to survive, and he's asking Bruce Willis for help, this blonde lady for help, and it's just like, well, they're not going to kill Kevin Dillon, but he, like, in my opinion, he's overacted in some of these movies that I've watched. I think the best movie I saw him in recently was in The Buddy Game, where he could just clown around with the gang like he did in Entourage. I feel like Matt Dillon, his brother's a much better actor, but, you know, enough action, enough suspense, interesting enough plot. So it was okay. It wasn't the worst movie, it wasn't the best movie. Then I watched Violent Night, and I thought, you know what? That's a pretty good movie. Like, David Harbour did a very good job. John Leguizamo was the bad guy. Beverly D'Angelo is the old rich lady. So the premise is Santa Claus is real. Ha, ha, ha. And he happens to be at this rich person's compound when some, like, bad guy, John Leguizamo, and all his crew kind of infiltrated his, waiters and helpers, and they want the money that Beverly D'Angelo's character has, where she's got all this money and stuff like that. Then you got to add the whole, her son is going through a separation or divorce with his wife, and, they made it biracial. And that, his sister is after the money, and their kid is a brat who does, like, TikTok videos, so it's kind of realistic that he's entitled and he does that. Things like that, and he works for his mother. So you got, like, the family aspect, and then you got, like, Leguizamo being the bad guy who wants revenge and hates Christmas and all this other stuff. And then David Harbour playing a Santa Claus who supposedly has not been Santa Claus his whole life. He had another life. That was pretty cool. And he was, like, bigger and stronger and punching all the bad guys and using all the tricks, of Christmas magic and stuff. And it definitely is true to its name. Violent Night. Lots of blood, a lot of gore, a lot of violence and stuff. So it's obviously not something for kids, but I feel like I can add it to the list of classic Christmas movies that I would watch if I were non-Jewish and I was like, I gotta watch Christmas movies the whole month of December, because it was actually pretty good, and it was barely an hour and 50 minutes. It was exciting throughout most of the movie. There wasn't a lot of many boring scenes except for some of the family drama and stuff, but I liked it. David Harbour really sold it as Santa Claus. I liked it. Then I saw God's Not Dead, We the People, and I can't remember if I've seen every single volume of God's Not Dead or God's Not Dead, We the People, because I don't think I saw the previous one, because the dude playing the pastor in the movie, I'm like, I don't know if I remember him, but this movie was somewhat written really cheesy and cliche, like a lot of these Christian movies are, and I'm just like, yeah, the woman who's doing the evaluation of the kids in the homeschooling saying we can't really have any Christian ideology when they're supposed to be like regular curriculum that the public schools have, and I'm like, okay. But then when it was like, are you married, you single, the kid was asking, she's like, I identify as self, whatever it is. And I'm like, so you're going to use that really weird term to describe yourself as not single, married, divorced, or widowed, but some weird new fancy term. But then you're like, you know what, we can't have Christianity being taught in homeschool. Literally, I think that was the dumbest line I ever heard in the movie. And it's obviously based on a true story, but it's like, I have friends who are homeschooled their whole life. I have friends who are homeschooled for a bit. I have friends who are homeschooling their kids, even though in Chicago, you move out of Chicago like my parents did and my best friend's parents did. So you can send your kids to the schools in the suburbs like Skokie where you get better education. Now, obviously, it's another debate for another time of like what the schools are now teaching with sexual education and gender identity and LGBT community. Like, that's another topic that if you as a religious person don't want your kid in the public school, but the Jewish state schools are expensive and you can't figure out, cool. So I thought, okay, the whole point of this movie was them trying to convince Congress to not outlaw, homeschooling unless you have to control what it is because other countries were doing it. And I'm like, when you have friends who homeschool their kids and you have friends who are homeschooled, you're like, you know what? I agree, this is stupid that they're trying to do this. Religion can stay in people's homes. That's why some people don't want to send their kids to school, and that's totally fine. But again, I watched it as something to put on in the background because I'm familiar with some of these movies before, and I was like, cool. Then I watched the movie Zeros and One with Ethan Hawke. It was the shortest movie I had. And it says he was playing both him and his brother, and he's playing like a you know, like a person who's trying to save his rebel brother who's in prison, then thwarting attack on, you know, the Vatican and stuff. And it was so slowly moving, and there was a lot of talk. The cinematography wasn't great. There was a lot of shaky cameras, and I'm like, what's going on? A lot of images in the dark where you can barely see. And before the movie started, I'm like, wait, did I start the special features by accident? Or am I actually watching the movie? And the reality was, he had to talk to you about how much he loves this director and all this other stuff. And I'm sorry, Ethan Hawke. Maybe I was because I was tired or it was so boring, but I fell asleep. And because it was so boring and bad, I may go back and try to watch some scenes maybe tomorrow or something, or later tonight. But it just was, I think I saw a majority of the movie, and it's just like, yeah, I don't get this whole, like, I gotta save the day, and my brother's, and I'm playing my brother too. It's just too much, Ethan Hawke. You're one of my favorite action actors, but, like, come on. Then I saw the movie Vesper, which is like an hour and 50-minute movie with credits, where they're trying to do this whole post-apocalyptic world where, you know, the world is ending and either the rich people or the government people are living fat, rich life above in this special ecosystem, and you're down there where the Earth ecosystem is destroyed and you got to survive, and they give you low, you know, income, like these seeds that are for trade and stuff. And there's a lot of confusing information and science going on where I only recognized one actor. I think it's Eddie Marston, whatever his name is, and he's supposedly like kind of the go-to person for the people on the thing, and he's got like all the control over the supplies and everything, Eddie Marston, and you're just like, okay, cool. And you can understand that. He's like on controlling all the stuff. People go to him for things and they do the trading and stuff. But then you're like, let's throw it in that his brother is dying and somehow his voice or his conscious in this flying little robot thing that helps the guy's son go around. His son's this like really good scientist with knowing the growing of all the seeds and all like the plants and the life on Earth. And that's interesting. This kid has got this whole weight on him, and they bump into a woman, but it's not a woman, and then she's trying to save her father. It's not her father, and all this other stuff, and it kind of backfires and screws them over. And I'm like, it was okay. It was an interesting idea to do about the whole ecosystem, the world, you know, being destroyed, and they got to figure out how to save the Earth instead of these other ways. But it was kind of very boring. A lot of the science that they were supposedly trying to tell you was a little bit over my head. But I will tell you, the best movie I did watch this week was probably Violent Night, because I was like, that's a really good movie. And I'll say The Curse did its job by scaring me. The Wire Room is like a typical cheesy Bruce Willis movie straight to DVD where he's barely doing anything. Same thing with The System, a cheesy action movie, but at least you're like, cool, Jeremy Piven, Terrence Howard, and Tyrese Gibson are in this movie, and I like it. Unless you're a fan of God's Not Dead / We the People franchise, I wouldn't go watch this. I would skip zeros and ones as much as I like Ethan Hawke and skip Vesper. Thanks again for listening to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations number 169. For On the Radar Today blog, I'm Radar. See you guys next time.